Good afternoon, sports fans. Big Al here on this Monday, March 17th, 2025. Happy St. Patrick's Day. And welcome to your weekly check of the standings and playoff races in both the NBA and the NHL. And I apologize for being so late with this week's edition and for not making one last week. Just a lot of things went on last week. I never had a chance to record, so we're going to go ahead and get into it. The current NBA and NHL standings, plus the playoff races in both leagues, as of Sunday, March 16th. If that sounds good, like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Ring the bell and get notified every time I go live. And these are all courtesy of ESPN.com. And let's get started with the NBA standings through March 16th. The top 6 teams in each conference will make the playoffs. Teams 7th through 10th will make the play-in tournament, and the bottom 5 teams would be out of the playoffs. Alright, so we're going to start off with the Eastern Conference. And sitting at the top of the Eastern Conference with the NBA's best record are the Cleveland Cavaliers at 56-11. They are 30-5 at home, 26-6 on the road, 11-1 versus the Central Division, and 38-8 versus the East. The team scores 122.5 points per game while allowing 111.6. Average point differential is plus 10.9. They are 9-1 over their last 10 games, including a loss in their most recent game, and that's after a 16-game win streak. The Cavaliers have already clinched a spot in the playoffs and the Central Division Championship. The number 2 seed in the East also locked up a spot in the playoffs, and that's the Boston Celtics at 49-19. They are 7.5 games behind the Cavs for first in the East, 23-12 at home, 26-7 on the road, 12-2 versus their division, the Atlantic, and 34-11 versus the East. They average 116.6 points per game while giving up 108.2. Average point margin is plus 8.4. They're 7-3 in their last 10 games, including 2 straight wins. The New York Knicks sit in the number 3 spot at 42-24. They are 13.5 games out behind the Cavs. 21-11 record at home, 21-13 on the road, 10-3 versus the Atlantic, 28-13 versus the East. They average 116.8 points per game while allowing 112.4. Average point differential is plus 4.4. They are 5-5 in their last 10, but they did lose their last game. The Milwaukee Bucks are presently in the number 4 spot in the East at 38-29. 18 games behind Cleveland, 23-12 at home, only 14-17 on the road, 7-7 versus the Central, 27-19 versus the East. They average 114.8 points per game and allow 112.7. Average point differential is plus 2.1. The Bucks are 6-4 in their last 10, but they did lose their last game as well. The Indiana Pacers are the number 5 seed in the East at 37-29, 18.5 games behind the Cavaliers. 20-9 record at home, 16-19 on the road. That doesn't add up, but that's what it says here. 8-6 record versus the Central, 22-21 versus the East. They average 116.3 points per game and allow 115.3. Average point differential is plus 1. They are 5-5 in their last 10, and they lost their last game also. The last team that would get into the playoffs as of right now, sitting in the number 6 spot, are the Detroit Pistons at 37-31. 19.5 games behind the Cavs. 18-16 at home, 19-15 on the road. Just 4-9 versus Central Division opponents. 25-21 versus the East. They average 114.8 points per game, allow 113.2. Average point differential is plus 1.6. They are 5-5 in their last 10, but they did lose 2 in a row. The next 4 teams would make the play-in tournament in the Eastern Conference. Currently sitting in the number 7 spot are the Atlanta Hawks at 32-36. 24.5 games out behind the Cavaliers for first in the East. 17-17 at home, 15-18 on the road. 8-4 record within the Southeast Division, 24-19 in the East. They average 117.1 points per game, allow 119.6. Average point differential is minus 2.5. They are also 5-5 in their last 10 games, including 2 straight losses. The Orlando Magic currently sit in the number 8 spot in the East at 32-37. 25 games behind Cleveland, 18-16 at home, 14-21 on the road, 8-3 record versus the Southeast, 25-20 within the conference. They average 104.6 points per game, allow 106 points per game, average point differential is minus 1.4. But they are struggling a bit, 3-7 in their last 10, although they did win their last game. The Miami Heat sit in the number 9 spot in the East at 29-38, 27 games behind Cleveland. 15-17 at home, 13-21 on the road, 7-5 versus the Southeast, 18-23 in the East. They average 109.3 points per game, allow 110.7. Average point differential is minus 1.4. They are 2-8 in their last 10 games and ice cold recently, losing 7 in a row. The number 10 team is the Chicago Bulls. They would be the last ones into the play-in tournament in the East with a 28-39 record. They are 28 games behind the Cavs, 13-22 at home, 15-17 on the road, 4-11 versus Central Division opponents. But they are playing 500 ball against the East at 23-23. They average 116.6 points per game while allowing 120.1. Average point differential is minus 3.5. They are 6-4 in their last 10, and they did lose their last game. On the outside of the playoffs looking in, you've got the Toronto Raptors sitting 11th in the East at 24-44. 32.5 games behind Cleveland. 16-20 at home, 8-24 on the road. 5-8 record versus the Atlantic, 15-29 versus the East. They average 110.9 points per game while allowing 115.6. Average point differential is minus 4.7. They are 6-4 in their last 10, and they lost their most recent game as well. Number 12 in the East are the Philadelphia 76ers at 23-44. 33 games behind the Cavs for first in the East. 12-22 at home, 11-22 on the road, 3-11 versus the Atlantic, 14-28 versus the East. They average 109.6 points per game while giving up 114.6. Average point differential is minus 5. They are 3-7 in their last 10, including a win in their most recent game. 13th in the East are the Brooklyn Nets at 23-45, 33.5 games behind the Cavs. 11-22 at home, 12-23 on the road, 3-9 record versus the Atlantic, and 13-30 overall in the East. They score 105.6 points per game, allow 111.7. Average point differential is minus 6.1. They are 2-8 in their last 10, but they did win their last game. 14th in the East, the Charlotte Hornets at 17-50. 39 games behind the Cavaliers. 10-24 at home, 7-26 on the road, only 1-12 versus the Southeast, 9-33 versus the East. They average 105.7 points per game while allowing 113.4. Average point differential is minus 7.7. They average 108.9 points per game, allow 120.7. Average point differential is minus 11.8. Dead last in the NBA. They're 6-4 in their last 10, but they have won back-to-back games. So recapping the East, the top 6 in the conference would be Cleveland, champions of the Central Division, Boston, who've already locked up a playoff spot, New York, Milwaukee, Indiana, and Detroit. Atlanta, Orlando, Miami, and Chicago would be in the play-in 2.5 games behind Chicago for 10th in the East. Philadelphia is 5 games out. Brooklyn 5.5 games out. Charlotte is 11 games out. And Washington is 12.5 games out of that number 10 spot in the East. Shifting over to the Western Conference, the top team there have already locked up a playoff spot, and that's the Oklahoma City Thunder at 56-12. 28-5 at home, 27-7 on the road, 11-4 record versus the Northwest Division, 32-11 record against the West. They scored 119.6 points per game, allow 107.1. Average point differential is actually the best in the NBA at plus 12.5. They are 9-1 in their last 10, including 3 straight wins. Then you have a 3-way tie for second place in the West with the Houston Rockets, Denver Nuggets, and Memphis Grizzlies. All 3 teams sit 43-25, and all 3 are 13 games behind Oklahoma City for first in the West. Looking at the Rockets, they are 25-10 at home, 18-14 on the road, 13-3 record versus the Southwest, 26-16 record within the conference. They average 113.2 points per game, allow 108.7. Average point differential is plus 4.5, and they are presently on a heater. Houston is 7-3 in their last 10, including 6 straight wins. The Nuggets are 23-11 at home, 20-14 on the road, 7-6 versus the Northwest, 26-15 record versus the West. They average 121.2 points per game, allow 116.9. Average point differential is plus 4.3. They are 5-5 in their last 10, including a loss in their most recent game. Meanwhile, the Grizzlies are 25-11 at home, 18-14 on the road, 10-5 versus the Southwest, and 25-16 versus the West. They average 122.7 points per game and allow 116.6. Average point differential is plus 6.1. They are 5-5 in their last 10, including a win in their most recent game. So based on the tiebreakers, Houston would be the number 2 seed in the West. Denver is number 3, and Memphis is number 4. Not far out in that battle for second in the West are the number 5 seed Los Angeles Lakers at 41-25. 14 games behind the Thunder, 26-7 at home, really good. 15-18 on the road, 12-3 versus the Pacific, 28-13 record in the West. They average 112.9 points per game, allow 111.4. Average point differential is plus 1.5. They are 6-4 in their last 10, including a win in their last game. Last team into the playoffs, sitting in the number 6 spot, are the Golden State Warriors. 39-28, 16.5 games behind OKC. 21-13 record at home, 18-15 on the road, only 3-10 versus the Pacific, and 22-19 versus the West. They average 113.6 points per game, allow 110.9. Average point differential is plus 2.7. They are 9-1 in their last 10, and they've won 7 in a row, so they are one of the hottest teams in the NBA at the present time. Alright, the next 4 teams would make the play-in tournaments. In the number 7 spot, you have the Minnesota Timberwolves at 40-29. 16.5 games behind Oklahoma City. 20-14 record at home, 20-15 on the road, 9-5 record versus the Northwest, 28-18 versus the West. They average 113.1 points per game, allow 108.9, average point differential is plus 4.2. They are 8-2, and they are the hottest team in basketball right now, winners of 8 in a row. Probably trying to solidify themselves for a top 6 spot. They are 2 percentage points behind Golden State for that number 6. Although record-wise, they are tied virtually. Number 8 are the Los Angeles Clippers, 38-30, 18 games behind OKC, 23-10 at home, only 15-20 on the road, 7-7 record versus the Pacific, and 21-22 in the West. They average 111.4 points per game while only allowing 108.4. Average point differential per game is plus 3. They are 6-4 in their last 10, and they've won 3 straight. In the number 9 spot, you have the Sacramento Kings at 33-33, 22 games behind the Thunder, 16-15 at home, 17-18 on the road, 4-10 versus the Pacific, 23-23 record versus the West. They average 116.3 points per game, allow 115.5. Average point differential is plus 0.8. They are 5-5 in their last 10, including 4 straight losses. And in the 10th and final spot in the Western Conference, as far as the play-in tournament is concerned, are the free-falling Dallas Mavericks at 33-36. 23.5 games behind Oklahoma City. 19-16 record at home, 14-20 on the road, 8-7 record versus the Southwest, 23-25 record overall versus the West. They average 114.7 points per game and allow 115.1. Average point differential is minus 0.4. They are 2-8 in their last 10, and they've lost 3 in a row. Now, this Dallas team has been battling a bunch of injuries recently. Meanwhile, on the outside of the playoffs, you've got the Phoenix Suns in 11th place in the West at 31-37. 25 games behind the Thunder. 19-13 at home, just 12-24 on the road. 9-5 record versus the Pacific, and 21-25 in the West. They average 114.2 points per game, allow 116.1. Average point margin is minus 1.9. They are 4-6 in their last 10, and they did lose their most recent game. 12th in the West are the Portland Trail Blazers. In fact, they are virtually tied with the San Antonio Spurs for 12th in the West. But based on winning percentage, Portland presently sits number 12 in the West at 29-39. 27 games behind OKC. 17-16 at home, 12-23 on the road. 5-9 record versus the Northwest, and 15-30 in the West. They average 110.6 points per game while allowing 114.5. Average point differential is minus 3.9. The Blazers are 4-6 in their last 10, and they've won their most recent game. The San Antonio Spurs, based on that same winning percentage, sit 13th. They are 2 percentage points behind Portland at 28-38. 27 games behind OKC. 17-16 at home, 10-21 on the road. 5-11 record versus the Southwest. 20-25 record in the West. They average 114.2 points per game and allow 116.5. Average point differential is minus 2.3. They are also 4-6 in their last 10 games, including a win in their most recent game. Meanwhile, the bottom two teams in the West have both been eliminated from playoff contention. Number 14 in the West are the New Orleans Pelicans at 18-50. 38 games out behind the Thunder for first in the West. 12-22 at home, 6-28 on the road, 3-13 versus the Southwest, 12-33 record versus the West. They average 110.8 points per game while allowing 119 per game. Average point differential is minus 8.2. They are 3-7 in their last 10, including 2 straight losses. And 15th in the West, also eliminated from the playoffs, are the Utah Jazz at 15-53. 41 games behind Oklahoma City. 8-25 at home, 7-28 on the road, 2-10 record versus the Northwest, and 7-38 versus the West. Yowza. They score 112.5 points per game while allowing 120 per game. Average point differential is minus 7.5. They are 1-9 in their last 10 games, and they are ice cold. Losers of 9 straight games. So, recapping the West, the top 6 in the conference would be Oklahoma City, already going to the playoffs. Then you've got Houston at number 2, Denver at 3, Memphis at 4, the LA Lakers at 5, and Golden State at number 6. In the play-in tournament, you have Minnesota at 7, the LA Clippers at 8, Sacramento at 9, and Dallas at 10. And on the outside, you've got the Phoenix Suns just a game and a half behind Dallas for that number 10 spot. Both Portland and San Antonio are 3.5 games out. And then New Orleans and Utah already out of the playoffs. They are 14.5 and 17.5 games out of the playoffs, respectively. So that's a look at the NBA standings through March 16th. Now we're going to turn our attention over to the NHL. And we'll start in the Eastern Conference, where the defending Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers lead the Atlantic Division. 68 games played and a record of 41-24-3 for 85 points, 35 wins in regulation, 37 in regulation or overtime, and a perfect 4-0 in the shootout. They have a 22-10-2 record at home and a 19-14-1 record on the road. The Panthers scored 221 goals in 68 games, while allowing 184 for a goal differential of plus 37. They are 7-3 in their last 10 games, but they did lose their last 2. Alright, there's a points tie for second in the Atlantic with the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Toronto Maple Leafs. Both teams played 66 games. Tampa Bay is 38-23-5. Toronto is 39-24-3. Both teams sit with 81 points. 33 regulation wins for the Lightning, 37 in regulation and overtime, and 1-2 in the shootout. While Toronto has 31 regulation wins, 38 in regulation or overtime, and 1-1 in the shootout. Tampa is 23-8-2 at home, 15-15-3 on the road. They've scored 234 goals, allowed 179. Goal differential is plus 55, which is second best in the East. They are 6-3-1 in their last 10, including a win in their most recent game. As for Toronto, they are 20-13-1 at home, 19-11-2 on the road. They've scored 210 goals, allowed 197. Goal differential is plus 13. They are 5-4-1 in their last 10, but they've lost 2 straight. The Ottawa Senators are in 4th place. 66 games played, 36-25-5 record for 77 points. 27 regulation wins, 35 in regulation or overtime, 1-2 record in the shootout. They have 20 wins, 9 losses, and 2 overtime losses at home versus 16-16-3 on the road. They've scored 195 goals, allowed 187, goal differential is plus 8. And they're hot right now. Ottawa is 7-2-1 in their last 10 games, including 6 straight wins. In 5th place are the Montreal Canadiens. 66 games played and a record of 32-27-7 for 71 points. 23 regulation wins, 30 in regulation or overtime. In the shootout, they are 2-2. The Habs are 17-12-4 at home, 15-15-3 on the road. They've scored 197 goals, allowed 216. Goal differential is minus 19. They're playing pretty well right now, 7-1-2 in their last 10, and a win in their most recent. Dropping to 6th place are the Detroit Red Wings. 67 games played, record of 32-29-6 for 70 points. 24 regulation wins, 29 in regulation or overtime, and they remain perfect in the shootout at 3-0. The Wings are 18-15-3 at home, 14-14-3 on the road. They've scored 194 goals, allowed 211. Average goal differential is minus 17. They've kind of cooled off a bit recently. They are 3-7 in their last 10, but they did win their most recent game, a shutout win at home over the Vegas Golden Knights. The Boston Bruins are in 7th place. 68 games played and a record of 30-30-8 for 68 points. 23 regulation wins, 30 in regulation or overtime, 0-1 in the shootout. 19-12-5 record at home versus 11-18-3 on the road. The Bruins have scored 184 goals and allowed 218. Goal differential is minus 34. They are 3-6-1 in their last 10, including 2 straight losses. And rounding out the Atlantic Division are the Buffalo Sabres. 65 games played and a record of 26-33-6 for 58 points. That's worse than the East. 21 regulation wins, 23 in regulation and overtime, 3-1 in the shootout. They are 17-14-3 at home, but real bad on the road at 9-19-3 rather. The Sabres scored 206 goals, allowed 230. Goal differentials minus 24. They are 3-6-1 in their last 10, and they did win their most recent game. Alright, so that wraps up the Atlantic Division. Now let's jump over to the Metro Division, led by the Washington Capitals. 67 games played, 44-15-8 record for 96 points, 37 regulation wins, 43 in regulation or overtime, 1-3 in the shootout. They are 21-7-6 at home, 23-8-2 on the road. They've scored 244 goals and allowed 175. Goal differential is plus 69. They are 6-4 in their last 10, including a win in their last game. Second place are the Carolina Hurricanes. 67 games played and a record of 41-22-4 for 86 points. 36 regulation wins, 41 in regulation or overtime. Winless in the shootout, 0-2. They are 27-7-1 at home, but only 14-15-3 on the road. They've scored 217 goals, allowed 178, goal differential is plus 39. They are 8-2 in their last 10, including 7 straight wins. So this may very well be the hottest team in the NHL right now, looking at those numbers. Third in the Metro are the New Jersey Devils. 68 games played, record 36-26-6 for 78 points. 32 regulation wins, 35 in regulation or overtime, 1-1 in the shootout. They are 17-11-4 at home and 19-15-2 on the road. They've scored 204 goals, allowed 177. Goal differential is plus 27. They are 5-5 in their last 10, including a loss in their last game. In fourth place, you've got the New York Rangers. 68 games played and a record of 33-29-6 for 72 points. 30 regulation wins, 32 in regulation or overtime, 1-0 in the shootout. They are 16-15-3 at home, 17-14-3 on the road. They've scored 204 goals and allowed 204. Their goal differential is 0. The Rangers are 4-4-2 in their last 10, including a loss in their last game. The Columbus Blue Jackets are in fifth place. 66 games played and a record of 31-27-8 for 70 points. 23 regulation wins, 27 in regulation or overtime, 4-1 in the shootout. 20 wins, 8 losses, 4 regulation losses at home versus 11-19-4 on the road. The Jackets have scored 217 goals and allowed 221. Goal differentials minus 4. They're kind of going in the wrong direction. They are 5-5 in their last 10, including 3 straight losses. In sixth place, you've got the New York Islanders. 66 games played, record of 30-28-8 for 68 points. 24 regulation wins, 28 in regulation or overtime, and 2-1 in the shootout. They are 16-13-3 at home, 14-15-5 on the road. Scored 179 goals, allowed 196. Goal differential is minus 17. They are 5-4-1 in their last 10, and they won their most recent. Sitting in seventh place, you've got the Pittsburgh Penguins. 69 games played and a record of 28-31-10 for 66 points. 19 regulation wins, 27 in regulation or overtime, and 1-5 in the shootout. 17-13-5 at home, 11-18-5 on the road. They've scored 202 goals, but they've allowed 250. That's not good. Goal differential also not good at minus 48. They are 5-4-1 in their last 10, including 4 straight wins. So they're a bit of a heater for the Pittsburgh Penguins as of right now. Rounding out the Metro Division is Pennsylvania's other team, the Philadelphia Flyers. 68 games played and a record of 28, 32, and 8 for 64 points. 17 regulation wins, 23 in regulation or overtime. But they have more shootout wins than any team in the National Hockey League. In fact, they played in the most shootouts of any team in the National Hockey League. 8 shootout games, 5-3 record. They are 16, 19, and 1 at home, 12, 13, and 7 on the road. They've scored 192 goals, allowed 232, goal differentials -40. The Flyers are 3-6-1 in their last 10, including a loss in their last game. And we'll update the playoff races shortly. Now we're going to turn our attention to the Western Conference, and leading the Central Division, number 1 with a bullet, are the Winnipeg Jets. 68 games played. How about this record? 47, 17, and 4 for 98 points. That's the best in the NHL. 38 regulation wins, 46 in regulation and overtime, 1-1 in the shootout. They are 25, 5-4 at home, 22 and 12 on the road. They've scored 237 goals, allowed 156. Goal differential is an NHL best, +81. They are 6-3-1 in their last 10, including 3 straight wins. In second place, you've got the Dallas Stars. 66 games played and a record of 42, 21, and 3 for 87 points. 35 regulation wins, 40 in regulation or overtime. Shootout record is 2-1. They are 24, 7-1 at home, 18, 14, and 2 on the road. They've scored 225 goals and allowed 174. Goal differential is +51. They are 6-3-1 in their last 10, and they've lost 2 straight. One of them to the team currently sitting third in the Central, and that's the Colorado Avalanche. 68 games played and a record of 41, 24, and 3 for 85 points. 35 regulation wins and 40 regulation or overtime wins, just like the Stars. Colorado is 1-2 in the shootout. They are 23, 10, and 2 at home, 18, 14, and 1 on the road. Scored 228 goals, allowed 197. Goal differential is +31. They are hot, 8-1-1 in their last 10, including 2 straight wins. Falling to fourth place, you've got the Minnesota Wild. 67 games played and a record of 37, 25, and 5 for 79 points. 29 regulation wins, 34 in regulation or overtime. 3-2 in the shootout. 15, 15, and 2 record at home, 22, 10, and 3 on the road. They've scored 184 goals and allowed 194. Goal differential was -10. They are 3-6-1 in their last 10, including 2 straight losses. The St. Louis Blues sit 5th in the Central at 68 games played and a record of 33, 28, and 7 for 73 points. 24 regulation wins, 29 in regulation or overtime, 4-1 in the shootout. 16, 14, and 3 record at home, 17, 14, and 4 on the road. They've scored 202 goals, allowed 202. Goal differential is 0. They are 7-2-1 in their last 10, including 2 straight wins. So they are definitely making a case for the playoffs in the Western Conference with 14 games left. The Utah Hockey Club sit in 6th place. Sorry about that. 67 games played and a record of 30, 26, and 11 for 71 points. 22 regulation wins, 29 in regulation or overtime, 1-3 in the shootout. They are 13, 13, and 7 at home, 17, 13, and 4 on the road. They've scored 190 goals, allowed 198. Goal differential is -8. They are 6-2-2 in their last 10, including a win in their last game. Sitting in 7th place, you've got the Nashville Predators. 66 games played, record of 25, 33, and 8 for 58 points. 21 regulation wins, 24 in regulation or overtime, 1-0 in the shootout. They are 17, 12, and 3 at home, but only 8, 21, and 5 on the road. Ouch. They've scored 171 goals and allowed 214. Goal differential is -43. They are 5-4-1 in their last 10 games, but they did lose back-to-back games. At the bottom of the Central Division are the Chicago Blackhawks. 67 games played and a record of 20, 38, and 9 for 49 points. 17 regulation wins, 19 in regulation and overtime, 1-2 in the shootout. They are 13, 15, and 4 at home, 7, 23, and 5 on the road. Scored 182 goals, allowed 237. Goal differential is -55. They are 3, 5, and 2 in their last 10, including 4 straight losses. On to the Pacific Division, where your leaders are the Vegas Golden Knights. 67 games played and a record of 39, 20, and 8 for 86 points. 36 regulation wins, 38 in regulation and overtime, 1-3 in the shootout. They are 24, 7, and 3 at home, 15, 13, and 5 on the road. They've scored 222 goals, allowed 184. Goal differential is +38. They are 5, 3, and 2 in their last 10 games, but they did lose 2 straight. The Edmonton Oilers, hanging tough in 2nd place. 67 games played, record of 39, 24, and 4 for 82 points. 28 regulation wins, 39 regulation and overtime wins, and 0-1 in the shootout. They are 20, 11, and 2 at home, 19, 13, and 2 on the road. They've scored 214 goals, allowed 194. Goal differential is +20. They are 5-5 in their last 10, including 2 straight wins. 3rd place, you've got the Los Angeles Kings, and they are comfortable in that 3rd place spot. 65 games played, record of 36, 20, and 9 for 81 points. 31 regulation wins, 35 in regulation or overtime, 1-3 in the shootout. 23, 3, and 4 record at home. That is really, really good. On the road, they're 13, 17, and 5. They've scored 185 goals, allowed 169. Goal differential is +16. They are 5, 3, and 2 in their last 10, and they're on a heater right now, winners of 5 in a row. In a distant 4th, you've got the Vancouver Canucks. 67 games played and a record of 31, 25, and 11 for 73 points. 24 regulation wins, 29 in regulation or overtime, 2-1 in the shootout. They are 14, 13, and 7 at home, 17, 12, and 4 on the road. 185 goals scored to 203 allowed, brings their goal differential to -18. They are 5-5 in their last 10, including a loss in their last game. The Calgary Flames are in 5th place. 65 games played, 30, 24, and 11 record for 71 points. 24 regulation wins, 27 in regulation or overtime, and 3-2 in the shootout. They are 18, 11, and 5 at home, 12, 13, and 6 on the road. They've scored 169 goals and allowed 190. Goal differential is -21. They are 4, 3, and 3 in their last 10 games, but they did lose back-to-back games. Sixth place are the Anaheim Ducks. 67 games played, record of 29, 31, and 7 for 65 points. 21 regulation wins, 26 in regulation or overtime, and 3-2 in the shootout. They are 16, 15, and 2 at home, 13, 16, and 5 on the road. Scored 179 goals while allowing 211. Goal differential is minus 32. They are 4-6 in their last 10, including a loss in their last game. Then in 7th place, you have the Seattle Kraken. 68 games played, 29, 34, and 5 record for 63 points. 23 regulation wins, 28 in regulation or overtime, 1-3 in the shootout. They are 16, 15, and 5 at home, 13 and 19 on the road. They've scored 203 goals, allowed 221, goal differential is minus 18. They are 4, 5, and 1 in their last 10, and they also lost their most recent game. And our first team eliminated from the Stanley Cup playoffs is the 8th place team in the Pacific, and that's the San Jose Sharks. 68 games played and a record of 18, 41, and 9 for 45 points. 13 regulation wins, 17 in regulation or overtime, and only 1-4 in the shootout. The Sharks are 10, 21, and 2 at home, 8, 20, and 7 on the road. They've scored 178 goals and allowed 255. Their goal differential is the worst in the league at minus 77. They are 3, 5, and 2 in their last 10, and they lost their last game. Okay. Taking a look at the playoffs, we'll start with the Eastern Conference and then work our way west. Alright. Florida, Tampa Bay, and Toronto would be your top 3 teams in the Atlantic. Washington, Carolina, and New Jersey would be your top 3 in the Metro. And then out west, Winnipeg, Dallas, and Colorado are your top 3 in the Central, while Vegas, Edmonton, and the LA Kings are your top 3 in the Pacific. Looking at the wild card races, we'll start with the Eastern Conference. The Ottawa Senators and the New York Rangers would be your 2 wild card spots in the East. Ottawa has 77 points, New York has 72. Montreal is 1 point out. Both Columbus and Detroit are 2 points out. The New York Islanders and the Boston Bruins are 4 points out. The Pittsburgh Penguins would be 6 points out. The Philadelphia Flyers 8 points out. And the Buffalo Sabres sit 14 points out of that second wild card in the East. Meanwhile, your top 2 wild card teams in the West would be Minnesota and Vancouver. Minnesota has 79 points while Vancouver has 73. St. Louis also has 73 points, but they played 1 more game than Vancouver, so as of right now, they would be on the outside looking into the playoffs. Both Calgary and Utah are 2 points out. Anaheim is 8 points out. Seattle is 10 points out. Nashville 15 points out. Chicago 24 points out. And San Jose 28 points out. And the Sharks have already been eliminated from the playoffs. Alright, those are your latest NBA and NHL standings checks through March 16th, plus the playoff races in both leagues. We are 10 days away from the start of Major League Baseball for 2025. We will have our first look at the MLB standings on April 7th. I wanted to play enough games so I can go ahead and do these standings, and I decided to start with the MLB standings checks on April 7th, so make sure you join me for that. As far as radio talk on the channel, I will be doing the FM radio stations reissue for Miami, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach, and the Florida Keys tomorrow. So if you love radio, make sure you join me for that. Plus, tomorrow I will also have the first four and the first round schedules for the NCAA tournament. That way you'll know which teams are playing, when they're playing, and on what channel. So, I will have all that info tomorrow. In the meantime, like, comment, and subscribe to my channel, ring the bell, and get notified every time I go live. Big Al signing off. Thanks for watching, and enjoy all the sports action this week. Peace out.